Hi again, everybody. I'm Edgar Jatu, and I'm the Executive Director for Workplace Fairness. And today I am joined by Sheila Maddali, who is the Executive Director at Grassroots Law and Organizing for Workers. Sheila, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Hi, everyone. Great to
Yeah.
be here. My name is Sheila Maddali, and I'm the Executive Director of Grassroots Law and Organizing for Workers, G.L.O.W. We are a national racial and economic justice organization that leverages legal resources and strategies to support worker organizing and to enhance the capacity and sustainability of the low wage worker movement.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for joining us today. The topic of our conversation today is to talk through some of the recent developments in anti discrimination law. There's been a lot of things happening at the federal level, which has caused some confusion amongst workers and employers alike. And so, our goal today is to kind of go through all the changes, what is, what are things that people should know and things and myths that we want to dispel, and then kind of talk through what next steps people should take when it comes to advocating for themselves when they feel as if they're being discriminated against, and what employers can do as well to still try to maintain inclusive workplaces. So, Sheila, why don't you give us a overview of the administrative changes that have taken place since inauguration?
Absolutely. I'll do a brief overview to
Yeah.
not lose folks. Um, Specifically starting with and kind of centering anti discrimination under the current administration, the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, and that's the government agency that enforces federal laws relating to workplace discrimination. Like every other agency, like the Department of Labor, like
Right.
OSHA, like every other labor enforcement agency, has shifted towards a more pro employer agenda, which includes less enforcement of worker protections. And so, specifically with regards to anti discrimination, we've seen Trump issue an executive order titled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit Based Opportunity, which rescinded prior executive actions that dated back to the 60s related to equal employment and affirmative action based on race and sex in federal employment. And so the new executive order rescinds these standards around affirmative action and equal opportunity hiring, as well as making it really clear that there's a prohibition on private sector DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion preferences, mandates, policies, and programs. And so this specifically applies to federal employees and federal contractors. But when we think about federal contractors, it's quite a broad reach. There's also, executive orders that have come out stating the federal government only recognizing the gender binary, and so meaning only recognizing male and female and no other genders. And so the impact of this is that the federal government will no longer use non binary gender categories in compliance or enforcement actions. And so, kind of to effectuate some of these goals, the administration, President Trump, removed the EEOC chair, Charlotte Burrows, as well as Jocelyn Samuels and General Counsel Carla Gilbride, all of who had a really strong record of protecting workers' rights and defending workers against discrimination, and replaced them with a new chair, Andrea Lucas, who's already begun kind of the rollback of workers' rights with regards to discrimination and harassment. Specifically, so far we've seen a lot of rollbacks relating to LGBTQ plus workers. So we've seen, in the EEOC, a shift in priorities as well as memos reinforcing the gender binary, removing gender identity resources from government websites, ending the use of non-binary gender markers in EEOC enforcement processes, and a whole host of other signals of where they're going. With regards to the National Labor Relations Board, we've seen the Trump administration, Trump discharged the prior general counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, who had a really worker friendly, union friendly record, and replaced her with William Cohen. Again, kind of signifying this more employer friendly, anti union National Labor Relations Board. He also removed, members of the NLRB, essentially kind of leaving the NLRB currently in this space where there's not enough quorum to really hear cases or make decisions, which not only affects workers' rights to unionize and engage in protected concerted activity, but also to hold their employers accountable for unfair labor practices by kind of keeping this department essentially hamstrung. There have also been within the NLRB a series of memos that have rescinded advancements made under the prior NLRB general counsel. So this relates to prohibitions on non-compete clauses, stay or pay agreements. Some of these advancements we had seen previously have been rolled back. And then, we've also seen a freeze on any department or agency from implementing a new rule or policy without approval. And so this freeze, has impacted a broad range of agency activities, including OSHA's new heat safety standards, protections around workers who are working in emergency response positions, the walk around rule, which allows third parties to participate in OSHA investigations in certain circumstances. But a lot of rules that were previously, about to be implemented are now halted. And then, I think we've also seen with the Department of Labor, again, like every other agency, a shift in priorities and ability to effectively enforce workers' rights. And then I'll say, I think we're also seeing everything that we're seeing with regards to stricter immigration policy and enforcement, and the kind of xenophobic language and rhetoric is also having a very strong impact on workers as well.
Yeah. Well, Sheila, thank you so much for that rundown. I couldn't have done it better myself. And shifting back to anti-discrimination law, when we talk about what's happening to EEOC, one other thing that I wanted to mention is, the EEOC's commitment to suing companies for reverse discrimination cases. So essentially, whether it's um, non, non workers of color who are non-white, who are or sorry, who are sorry workers who are workers of color who are um, perceived to have an advantage over white workers, or also national or based on national origin, where you're having um, employers worrying about whether or not they're discriminating against white American workers or American workers over migrant workers. So, do you have anything more to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall we're seeing this really kind of obsessive interest by this administration in DEI policies and kind of ending these interventions that just keep workplaces diverse.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
yeah,
think we are seeing an obsessive interest in that.
yeah. And one other thing I want to add is recently we've gotten news that um, in terms of in federal workplaces, as Sheila mentioned, agencies are by statute supposed to uh, investigate any claims of discrimination. And they have these offices called EO offices where a federal employee can go to file a claim. We're starting to see that a lot of these offices are starting to be closed or being merged into other offices, which makes it much more challenging for people to assert their rights or even request certain things like an accommodation for disability. So that's another update that I wanted to share as well. So Sheila, it begs the question, what should workers know right now about how to advocate for their rights? What is still available to them if they find themselves in a position where they feel that they're being discriminated against or harassed or some other violation of federal discrimination law?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to note that despite these changes and the presidential administration that's more hostile to workers and to people of color, to immigrants, to LGBTQ folks, and other marginalized
Right.
communities, that we still have rights. Workers still have the right. They have the tools, they have the organizational support necessary to join unions, to become members of worker centers, to take legal action, to defend their rights, whether that's by filing with an agency or filing in court. I think that joining an organization and leveraging collective power to reshape living and working conditions is one of the most important things that we can do in this moment to protect our communities and to continue advancing the fight for justice. I've been really heartened to see unions and worker centers in this moment continuing to organize and build power,
Mhm.
protecting workers, pushing back against the rollback of rights, and using all of the tools at their disposal to continue to advance wages, benefits, and working conditions. I think in addition to the laws that exist at the federal level, we have a whole host of state and local laws that also do exist and that are an avenue for workers. And I think, it would be also just really important to kind of remind folks that, we do still have rights and that we have yet to see really substantive changes to the law.
Mhm.
And that, although the administration came out of the gate enacting this series of executive orders and using this really anti worker, anti immigrant, and frankly racist rhetoric, and that does signify their interest and their values.
Right.
But the
Right.
reality is the protections and the foundations of law still do exist. And so, there is a lot of fear and there is a likely rollback of rights, but we still have rights that we can and should be exercising. Title VII of the
Mhm.
Civil Rights Act, the American Disabilities Act, the National Labor Relations Act, those laws still exist and they still protect workers every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
in addition to the state and local laws.
Yeah. No, thank you for mentioning that. That the laws that have been enacted in the past are still in place, and I would also add that, you know, courts seem as of right now, poised to enforce those rights. We're not seeing anything in the courts so far that indicates otherwise. I mean, okay, it's a long game, so we'll see, of course, how that all plays out. So, you know, I want to present this to you, Sheila. You know, if I'm a federal contractor, for example, and I have a discrimination complaint, where do I go now if I can't really go to the government? What can I do?
So I think the avenues still exist, right? You could still file with the EEOC or the Office of Fair Federal Contracts, OFCCP. Though they still are enforcing the laws. The substantive law has not changed. But additionally, there are, depending on the state that you're in, there are many states, if not most states, have corresponding state agencies that enforce state anti-discrimination laws. And although with anti-discrimination claims, you do have to first file with the EEOC and get a right to sue letter
Mhm.
before going to court, that is also an avenue of private enforcement of rights.
Right.
So I think, we still have these agencies,
Right.
we still have state agencies.
Right. And I'll just also add that even if you come across a office that's hostile to your claim, doesn't mean that it can prevent you from going to court. I mean, you might have to, wait for the statutory timeframes to lapse so you can do that, but just know that not all is lost if you encounter pushback or someone actively trying to make it difficult for you to file a claim at any at, at any agency at the EEOC at the federal level. So I add that in there. And another thing that I want to throw out you, Sheila, is if you're someone that is transgender or identifies by a different type of gender, what can you do? Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there as to, if there's still laws in place to protect people who are non-binary.
Absolutely. And there are. The law has not changed yet. Title VII still exists. The Supreme Court case Bostock that extends Title VII to protect gender identity still exists. Like you mentioned, Edgar, we have not seen a rollback in rights yet through the courts. And so the law that protects LGBTQ workers, that protects trans workers, still exists. What we might see is a change in enforcement policies and processes through these agencies and through the federal courts. But that doesn't change the underlying law. And so there is still a right to be free from discrimination. And I think it's how we use those rights, it's how we advocate, and it's how we organize to make sure that we are not giving up our rights any sooner than we need to, and maybe we don't need to at all.
Yeah,
So it's continuing to push and continuing to fight.
yeah, yeah. No, thank you for that, Sheila. And let me ask you this question. Why should employers care about this? Like, what would you say to employers to make them understand that this is their fight too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's tons of studies and research about the impact and benefits of a diverse workplace, of treating your workers with respect and dignity, that I won't go into. But I think that there's like a positive business impact in this. I also think that at the end of the day, employers also are people who live in our communities, who have neighbors, who interact with people who are of all races, all ethnicities, national origins, genders, and I think that we are your community too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you think you put it very well. Employees don't live in a vacuum, right? They are very much part of the fabric of neighborhoods and communities, and very important part of that too, depending on where they are. So thank you for sharing that. And what are the long-term implications for workplace inclusion and workers' rights based off what we talked about today?
Yeah. I like keep telling myself we just have to get through the next 4 years. But also, I'm very aware that the impact of the kind of hostile environment this administration is creating for workers, for immigrants, for people of color, for LGBTQ folks is likely to be felt for more than the next 4 years.
Hmm.
It's not that, if we have a new administration, we'll be starting where we left off, but we'll actually be starting from however far back this
Right.
current administration takes us. And, the rollback of rights will need to be undone. But there are also many things that cannot be undone. I think you cannot the harm that's caused by a deportation,
Hmm.
the harm that's caused by denying healthcare to a trans child, or the harm that's done by terminating a family sustaining benefit like SNAP or Medicaid. These things are not just undone.
Right.
And the policies that are implemented now by this administration are changing the atmosphere for our organizing and will hinder our communities long term. I think we see nonprofit organizations being attacked.
Right. Right.
Immigrants are being deterred from taking action or enforcing their rights. Unions are at risk of losing the momentum that has been building for the past several years. And progress on wages and benefits at the federal level is likely going to be halted.
Yeah.
But I think, in this moment, again, it's so important that we continue to hold the ground that we do have, to push back and then make advancements on the state and local level. And that's where, I'm so heartened to see the organizing that's happening to continue to raise wages on the state and local level, to strengthen contract workers' rights, to advance workplace safety policies, and to improve wages and working conditions and unemployment benefits for all.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Sheila. And I would just add that I just encourage everyone to educate themselves and to try to expand their knowledge. There's a lot of dust that's kicked in the air right now, but as we're seeing as the dust settles, as we have talked about today, a lot of the rights that have been in place for a long time are still here for now. But I think what's really important for the next 4 years is that we talk to one another and stay on top of the news, and really think critically about a lot of these changes that are being made, right? Because everyone has to work at some point, right? Whether you're a full-blown adult now and have a job, or if you're a young person looking to enter the workplace, and it's really important to understand what things are being taken away or what things are being made more difficult, and if that's something if that's an America you want to live with, right? And particularly as we're increasing in a country that's becoming even more diverse, despite well, that's happening. We're a much more diverse country than we have been ever in our history. So uh, so as much as people are trying to make it seem as otherwise, a lot of these communities are here to stay. And so we have to decide, individually and collectively, what kind of country do we want to live in, and what kind of workplaces do we want to be working in. So, Shirley, any final thoughts before we close?
No, I just say thank you so much for creating this space and for
Yeah.
your time.
No problem, Sheila. And thank you so much for your time today. And thank you all for listening to us. And as a reminder, G.L.O.W and Workplace Readiness have many resources for you to tap in. So please visit our websites for more information. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.